Shalom, shalom, everybody. There is no rapture. The rapture is false doctrine. Is there a rapture? What is a rapture? Where did it come from? Is it scriptural? First thing I want to say is that Yahuwah, Elohim, and Yahusha have no religion. Secondly, Christianity is false doctrine. A Christian is a Cretan. Look up the definition. The term rapture comes from a Latin translation of the Greek verb harpazo, meaning caught up, which Paul used in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 16 and 17. So where did the rapture come from? Is the rapture even scriptural? The rapture theory is one of the most recent doctrines to have been developed in modern Christianity. It was developed around the 19th century and has become exceedingly popular in the past 50 years. There are a number of variations about the rapture, such as pre-tribulation, mid-tribulation, or post-tribulation. But the general idea is that all Christians will be taken up to heaven at some point during the last days. It is sometimes referred to as the secret rapture because they believe it will come suddenly and without warning. They teach that the rapture could happen at any moment, so we must always be ready because no one knows the day or the hour. Many of the recent books and movies about the rapture convey an almost comical situation in which piles of clothes are left on chairs where people once sat. Vehicles are suddenly abandoned while driving down the road, and everyone on earth who are left behind are overcome with confusion and fear. So where did the rapture doctrine come from? There is no documented evidence of anyone teaching the rapture prior to the late 18th century. That means for the first 1700 years of Christianity, no one was teaching the rapture. Nobody. The first known mention was in an essay published in 1788 by Morgan Edwards, and the next by a Jesuit priest named Manuel Lacunza in 1811. Then in 1827, John Nelson Darby put forth one of the most noteworthy works regarding the rapture, which caused the theory to circulate among the masses. As a result, Darby is believed by many to be the one who introduced the rapture concept, since there was no major Christian teaching about it prior to him. He was not the first to mention it, but Darby was definitely the one who made it popular. Darby is also called the father of dispensationalism because he was so instrumental in spreading the belief that Elohim changes the rules and the way he interacts with people during different periods of time. Darby taught the prophetic timetable had been paused at the founding of the church and that the unfulfilled biblical prophecies will not take place until after the rapture of the church. He also taught that the rapture would be a secret catching away that could happen at any moment without any signs or warnings. By the late 19th century, preachers such as C.I. Scofield began teaching the rapture theory along with dispensationalism and increasing its popularity among Protestant churches worldwide. Scofield also published his own translation of the Bible called the Scofield Reference Bible, which he used to teach the rapture theory in his footnotes. With over 3 million copies sold printed in the first 50 years, this popular Bible was widely distributed in both the United States and England. Many of the preachers who read this Bible accepted its footnotes as authoritative and began teaching the rapture theory in their own churches. This is when the rapture really became a common belief among Protestants. It became even more popular in the 1970s when Hal Lindsey wrote The Great Planet Earth, and was further cemented into Christian doctrine in the 1990s with the Left Behind series by Jim Jenkins and Tim LaHaye. The Left Behind books were so popular that in 1998 the first 4 books of the series held the top 4 slots in the New York Times bestseller list simultaneously, and the total sales for this series has surpassed over 65 million copies sold. Obviously, the rapture theory has become very popular among Christians, but popularity is not what determines sound doctrine. Our doctrine must always come from the word of Yahuwah Elohim and not the imaginations of men. The scriptures is our source for truth and doctrine. So we need to find out if the rapture theory is scriptural or not. There are a few verses that are commonly used to support the rapture theory. So we need to examine those verses to see what the scriptures is actually telling us. One of the most common verses used is 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 17. Chapter 4, verse 17. Then we the living who are left over shall be caught away together with them in the clouds to meet the Master in the air, and so we shall always be with the Master. However, when we look at the context of this verse, we find out that Shaul Paul, that's his real name, Shaul Paul, is actually talking about the resurrection of the dead. Now let's read 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 through 17. Let's read it in the context for what it really says. Now, brothers, we do not wish you to be ignorant concerning those who have fallen asleep, lest you be sad as others who have no expectation. For if we believe that Yahusha died and rose again, so also Elohim shall bring with him those who sleep in Yahusha. For this we say to you by the word of the Master, that we, the living, who are left over at the coming of the Master, shall in no way go before those who are asleep. Because the Master himself shall come down from heaven with a shout, with the voice of a chief messenger, and with the trumpet of Elohim, and the dead in the Messiah shall rise first. Then we, the living who are left over, shall be caught away together with them in the clouds to meet with the Master in the air, and so we shall always be with the Master. Many who hold to the rapture theory claim it will happen secretly and without warning. But these verses describe a shout and a trumpet that will announce the return of the Messiah. This is not a secret vanishing of believers. This is a worldwide announcement of the return of the Messiah. Notice also that the text says in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 15, For this we say to you by the word of the Master, that we, the living who are left over at the coming of the Master, shall in no way go before those who are asleep. So if the living do not precede the dead, then how are we raptured before the tribulation? Because Shaul, Paul, said that when Yahusha returns, the dead in Yahusha, Mashiach, Messiah, will rise first. This is the first resurrection, as described in the book of Revelation. However, Revelation tells us the first resurrection will take place after the tribulation when Mashiach, Messiah, returns to set up his kingdom. Now let's turn to Revelation chapter 20, verse 4 through 6. And I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was given to them. And the lives of those who had been beheaded because of the witness they bore to Yahusha, and because of the word of Elohim, and who did not worship the beast, nor his image, and did not receive his mark upon their foreheads or upon their hands, and they lived and reigned with Messiah for 1,000 years. And the rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and set apart is the one having part in the first resurrection. The second death possesses no authority over these, but they shall be priests of Elohim and of Messiah, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. Probably the most popular verse that is used to support the rapture theory is 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 52. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 52. And that states, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. However, looking at the rest of the chapter, we see that this verse has been completely taken out of context to support their theory. Let's read 1 Corinthians chapter 15, but let's back it up to verse 42 through 44. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 42 through 44. So also is the resurrection of the dead. It is sown in corruption. It is raised in incorruption. It is sown in disrespect. It is raised in esteem. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in power. It is sown a natural body. It is raised a spiritual body. There is a natural body and there is a spiritual body. Then Shaul, Paul, explains that we must obtain a spiritual body before we can inherit the kingdom of Elohim. Because corruption cannot inherit incorruption. Now, let's look at the text in question and see how it fits into Paul's argument for the resurrection. Let's look at 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 51 through 55. See, I speak a secret to you. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible has to put on incorruption, and this mortal to put on immortality. And when this corruptible has put on the incorruption, and this mortal has put on the immortality, then shall come to be the word that has been written. Death is swallowed up in overcoming. O death, where is your sting? O Sheol, where is your overcoming? Hosea chapter 13, verse 14. Notice again that Shaul Paul mentions the trumpet sound and the dead being resurrected. This is the same event that he was describing in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, which takes place after the tribulation. This entire chapter is about the resurrection of the dead, not a pre-trib rapture. Another popular verse that is used to support the rapture is Matthew 24, verse 31. Matthew 24, verse 31. And he shall send his messengers with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his chosen ones from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. Again, notice that it is announced with trumpets. So this is no secret gathering of believers. In Matthew 24, Yahusha is answering a question that his disciples asked him, saying in Matthew 24, verse 3, and as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the taught ones came to him separately, saying, say to us, when shall this be? And what is the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? To which Yahusha responded by describing a number of events that will take place before he returns. He warned that there will be false messiahs, false prophets, wars, famines, earthquakes, and tribulation before his return. Then he described his return in Matthew chapter 24, verses 29 through 31. Matthew chapter 24, verses 29 through 31. And immediately after the distress of those days, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give its light, and the stars shall fall from the heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then the sign of the Son of Adam shall appear in the heaven. The Son of Man shall appear in the heaven. And then all the tribes of the earth shall mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man, coming on the clouds of the heavens with power and much esteem. And he shall send his messengers with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his chosen ones from the four winds, from one end of the heaven to the other. It is very clear from this passage that Yahusha is going to return after the tribulation to gather his people. We have the same element here as we did in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and 1 Corinthians chapter 15. The trumpet sound, Mashiach, Messiah, coming in the clouds and gathering his people to him. But Yahusha makes it clear that these things will happen immediately after the tribulation, which completely disproves the pre-tribulation rapture. Another related scripture that is often cited as proof of the rapture is also found in Matthew chapter 24. And it speaks about one person being taken while another is left behind. This is actually where the Left Behind book series got its name. However, we must look at the context of these verses to find out who is being taken and who is being left behind. Matthew chapter 24, verses 37 through 42. Matthew chapter 24, verses 37 through 42. And as the days of Noah, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For as they were in the days before the flood, eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark. And they did not know until the flood came and took them all away. So also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Then two shall be in the field. The one is taken and the one is left. 2 women shall be grinding at the mill. One is taken and one is left. Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your master is coming. Yahushua said that his return will be like the days of Noah. And just as the flood took away everyone outside of the ark, so also will the wicked be taken away when Messiah returns. This is the opposite of the Left Behind series, which portrays those in Elohim being taken away and the wicked being left behind. However, we don't want to be taken away like those in the days of Noah. Before Yahushua was crucified, he prayed an amazing prayer for all of his followers, present and future. And the words of his prayer go against the very idea of a rapture. John chapter 17, verses 14 through 17. John chapter 17, verses 14 through 17. I have given them your word, and the world hated them, because they are not of the world, as I am not of the world. I do not pray that you should take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the wicked one. They are not of the world, as I am not of the world. Set them apart in your truth. Your word is truth. Did you catch that? Yahushua was opposed to the idea of a rapture. His prayer was that we would remain in the world and that we would be separate from the world, being sanctified by the truth of Elohim's word. This is very similar to the parable he told us about the wheat and the tares, in which the owner instructed the servants to let the wheat and tares grow together until the harvest. Matthew chapter 13, verse 30. Matthew chapter 13, verse 30. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at the time of the harvest I shall say to the reapers, first gather the darnel, the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. As we have seen, the scriptures describing the snatching away of the wicked from the earth, and those in Elohim being left behind to join Yahushua in his kingdom. It's the opposite of what Christianity teaches. Christianity teaches that the rapture is those in Yahuwah Elohim get taken away and everybody else gets destroyed and everyone's in heaven. That's not true. The tares, those that are not following Yahuwah's laws, statutes, and commands, those are the ones that are going to get taken away at the end of the tribulation and burned. And those in Yahuwah and Yahusha remain. As you can see, with scriptural proof, there is no rapture. The scriptures does not teach a harpazo or catching away or rapture, whatever you want to call it. Whether it be pre-trib, mid-trib, or whatever, there is no rapture. You don't want to be taken away. You do not want to be raptured. That's the darnel, the tares. I pray to Yahuwah in the name of Yahusha that everyone finds their way, that everyone comes into truth, that everyone repents from man-made traditions and their religions and their sins, and gets to know Father Yahuwah now before it's too late. We're living in the last days as we speak. There's not a lot of time left. I pray in the name of Yahushua HaMashiach. This is the rapture is false doctrine. Shalom, everybody.